Billy the Kid was 21 years old when he died. The man who killed him had been his best friend for 3 years. They'd shared money, whiskey, women, and secrets that could hang them both. Pat Garrett pulled the trigger in complete darkness, firing at a voice he recognized instantly. The bullet went through Billy's heart. Garrett never spent the reward money. His hand shook for the rest of his life whenever someone mentioned that night. 3 months earlier, Garrett had taken an oath as Lincoln County Sheriff. The first name on his list was William H. Bonney, Billy the Kid, his friend. The territorial governor offered $500 dead or alive. Garrett took the job without hesitation. When Billy heard the news, he laughed. He told his gang that Pat would never do it, that their friendship meant more than money. He was wrong about the money. He was right about what it cost. Billy had killed 21 men by most counts. Some said more. He'd escaped from jail twice, survived ambushes, and walked out of gunfights that should have ended him. At 21, he was the most wanted outlaw in New Mexico territory. Every lawman, bounty hunter, and hired gun knew his face. The bounty on his head could buy a ranch. But Billy didn't run far. He stayed near Fort Sumner, where he had friends, women who hid him, and places he knew better than any hunter could learn. Pat Garrett knew these places too. He'd ridden with Billy through this territory when they were both outlaws in everything but name. They'd gambled in the same saloons, slept in the same hideouts, courted the same women. Garrett knew Billy's habits, his friends, his weaknesses. He knew that Billy trusted too easily, that he never thought a friend would betray him, that he believed loyalty meant something permanent. Garrett knew all of this because he'd been the friend Billy trusted most. The hunt began in December 1880. Garrett assembled a posse of men who knew the territory. Some of them had ridden with Billy, others had lost friends to him. They tracked Billy across New Mexico through winter cold that froze their hands to their rifles. Billy stayed one step ahead, moving between hideouts, protected by people who loved him or feared what would happen if they didn't. He sent messages to Garrett through mutual friends, asking if they could talk, if they could end this without blood. Garrett never responded. He just kept hunting. On December 19th, Garrett's posse caught up with Billy's gang at a place called Stinking Springs. They surrounded a stone house where Billy and 4 others were sleeping. Garrett positioned his men before dawn, rifles trained on the only door. His plan was simple: wait for someone to come out, confirm it was Billy, and shoot. At sunrise, a man stepped through the doorway wearing Billy's hat. Garrett gave the signal. His posse opened fire. The man went down with 12 bullets in him. His name was Charlie Boder. He was wearing Billy's hat because they'd traded the night before. Billy surrendered 2 days later when the posse threatened to burn the house with everyone inside. He walked out with his hands up, smiling like this was all some joke between friends. Garrett didn't smile back. He put Billy in chains and took him to Santa Fe, then to Mesilla for trial. The trial lasted 1 day. The verdict was guilty of murdering Sheriff William Brady 3 years earlier. The sentence was death by hanging, to be carried out in Lincoln on May 13, 1881. Billy would die in the same town where he'd killed Brady, in the courthouse that used to be Brady's office. They locked Billy on the 2nd floor of the Lincoln County Courthouse with 2 guards, James Bell, who'd always treated Billy decent, and Bob Olinger, who hated him with the kind of hatred that comes from fear disguised as contempt. Olinger talked about the hanging constantly, describing the rope, the drop, what Billy's face would look like when his neck snapped. He kept a double-barrel shotgun loaded with 18 buckshot pellets in each barrel, 36 pieces of lead he promised he'd use if Billy tried anything. He told Billy the gun was loaded special, just for him. On April 28th, 5 days before the scheduled hanging, Olinger took 5 prisoners across the street for a meal. Bell stayed behind with Billy, unlocking one wrist so Billy could use the outhouse in the yard. They'd done this routine every day. Bell wasn't worried. Billy was still wearing leg irons, shuffling when he walked, and Bell had a pistol on his hip. What Bell didn't know was that Billy had convinced someone, historians still debate who, to hide a pistol in the outhouse, or that Billy had been practicing how to shuffle fast in chains, or that Billy had decided he'd rather die trying to escape than let Olinger watch him hang. Billy came back from the outhouse walking behind Bell up the stairs. At the top landing, Billy made his move. Some witnesses said he hit Bell with the chains. Others said he grabbed Bell's gun in a struggle. What everyone agreed on was the sound. 2 gunshots in rapid succession. Bell staggered down the stairs and out the front door, trying to reach safety. He collapsed in the yard and died saying Billy's name. He'd shown Billy nothing but kindness. Billy had killed him anyway, because kindness doesn't stop a hanging. Billy took Bell's pistol and moved to the window overlooking Main Street. He saw Olinger running toward the courthouse, shotgun in hand, responding to the gunfire. Billy called out, "Hello, Bob." Olinger looked up. Billy was standing at the window with Olinger's own shotgun, the one loaded special with 36 buckshot pellets meant for Billy's escape attempt. Billy said, "Here's your gun, Bob." He fired both barrels. The impact lifted Olinger off his feet and threw him backward into the street. He was dead before he hit the dirt. The gun meant to kill Billy had killed its owner instead. For 18 minutes, Billy worked on removing his leg irons while the town watched from doorways and windows. Nobody tried to stop him. Some were too afraid. Others had liked Billy well enough or hated Olinger more. Billy found a pickaxe and broke the chains. He gathered weapons, ammunition, 2 horses. He told the gathering crowd that he'd never wanted to kill Bell, that Bell was a good man, but that he wasn't going to hang for anyone. He said if Garrett wanted him, Garrett could come find him. Then he rode out of Lincoln, heading east. 2 men were dead. Billy the Kid was free. Pat Garrett's manhunt started again. For 10 weeks, Billy moved through New Mexico like a ghost. He stayed with friends near Fort Sumner, a small settlement where he'd always been welcome. He visited his girlfriend, Paulita Maxwell, whose brother Pete owned the biggest house in town. He played cards, danced at fandangos, lived like a man with nothing to fear. People who saw him said he seemed different after Lincoln, more reckless, like he'd stopped believing he could die, or had stopped caring if he did. He'd beaten the law, escaped the noose, and killed his way to freedom. Nothing seemed impossible anymore. This confidence would kill him. Pat Garrett heard Billy was near Fort Sumner. He didn't bring a posse this time. He brought 2 deputies, John Poe and Thomas McKinney, men Billy wouldn't recognize. On July 14, 1881, they rode into Fort Sumner after dark. Garrett needed information, someone who'd tell him where Billy was sleeping, whose house, which room. He knew exactly who to ask. Pete Maxwell, the richest man in town, whose sister was sleeping with Billy. Maxwell would talk because Billy's presence was dangerous, bringing lawmen and bounty hunters who might shoot first and identify bodies later. Around midnight, Garrett and his deputies approached Maxwell's house. The building was long and low, with several rooms opening onto a porch. Maxwell's bedroom was at the corner, accessible from outside. Garrett told his deputies to wait on the porch while he went inside to talk to Pete. He wanted names, locations, confirmation that Billy was in town. He found Maxwell in bed and sat beside him in the dark, speaking in whispers. Outside, Poe and McKinney stood on the porch, watching the moonlit street, not knowing that Billy the Kid was about to walk straight toward them. Billy had spent the evening at a fandango, dancing and drinking. Now he was hungry. He'd gone to a friend's house nearby to get meat for a late meal. He was walking back toward his room, which was elsewhere in the Maxwell complex, carrying a butcher knife and a piece of beef. He wore no gun belt. His pistol was in his room. He was barefoot, wearing only pants and an unbuttoned shirt against the summer heat. He was 21 years old and had less than 2 minutes to live. Billy saw 2 men he didn't recognize standing on Pete Maxwell's porch. Strangers in Fort Sumner after midnight meant lawmen or hunters. His instinct was right, but his response was wrong. Instead of running, he approached them, staying in shadow, knife ready. He wanted to know who they were before deciding what to do. The deputies saw a figure moving in darkness, Mexican or Anglo they couldn't tell, armed with something that caught moonlight. Neither man spoke, neither drew. They were waiting for Billy to identify himself. He didn't. Billy walked past them and entered Pete Maxwell's bedroom. He moved to the bed, sensing someone there in the darkness. He could see only shapes, shadows. He spoke in Spanish, the language he'd learned from his time in New Mexico, the language of his friends and his girlfriend. "Quién es?" "Who is it?" His voice was instantly recognizable, higher than expected, with the accent of the Southwest. He was asking Pete who the strangers were on his porch, expecting an answer from his girlfriend's brother. Instead, Pat Garrett recognized his friend's voice in the dark. Garrett raised his pistol and fired. The distance was less than 6 feet. The muzzle flash lit the room for a fraction of a second. Billy's face, startled, the knife in his hand, his chest exposed. The bullet went through Billy's heart and exited his back, embedding in the wall behind him. Billy fell backward onto the floor. He tried to speak, but only blood came out. His feet kicked twice against the floorboards. Then he was still. The entire sequence, Billy entering, speaking, being shot, and dying, took maybe 6 seconds. Pat Garrett had killed his best friend in complete darkness, aiming at a voice. Garrett stood frozen. The gunpowder smell filled the small room. He couldn't see if the body on the floor was actually Billy, or if he'd just murdered an innocent man in Pete Maxwell's bedroom. Maxwell was shouting in terror, scrambling out of bed. The deputies burst through the door with guns drawn, confused, asking what happened. Garrett said, "I think I got him." His voice was shaking. Someone found a candle. The light showed Billy the Kid face up on the floor, eyes open, blood spreading from the chest wound. He was dead. The most wanted outlaw in New Mexico territory had died barefoot and unarmed, shot by his former friend while asking a simple question in Spanish. The news spread through Fort Sumner within minutes. By dawn, half the town had filed through Maxwell's bedroom to see the body, to confirm that Billy the Kid was really dead. Some of the women cried. Several of Billy's friends stared at Garrett with looks that promised future violence. Garrett stood outside, smoking, watching sunrise, trying to stop his hands from shaking. He'd done his job. He'd earned the reward. He'd avenged every lawman Billy had killed. But he'd also shot an unarmed man in the dark, a man who'd trusted him enough to ride together, to share secrets, to believe their friendship was real. They buried Billy the Kid the next day in the old military cemetery at Fort Sumner, next to his friends Charlie Boder and Tom O'Folliard, both killed during Garrett's hunt. The grave marker was simple wood, carved with Billy's name and the date. Women from town brought flowers. His friends stood silent, hands near their guns, watching Garrett and his deputies, who stayed only long enough to confirm the burial before leaving town fast. Nobody said prayers. Nobody made speeches. They put Billy in the ground and walked away. Pat Garrett collected the $500 reward from Governor Lew Wallace. He never spent it. Some historians say he felt guilty about killing Billy unarmed. Others say he feared Billy's friends would kill him if he profited from murder. Garrett tried to move on, but the story followed him everywhere. People asked constantly about that night, wanting details, wanting to know if Billy had really been his friend, if he'd hesitated, if he felt anything. Garrett's answers changed over time, becoming defensive, angry, contradictory. His hand shook whenever he held a gun after that night. Some who knew him said he never slept well again. The legend grew faster than the truth. Within weeks, newspapers across America were printing stories about Billy the Kid. The boy outlaw, the fastest gun, the cold-blooded killer, the Robin Hood of New Mexico. Some stories said he'd killed 21 men, one for each year of his life. Others claimed 40. Dime novels appeared within months, inventing adventures that never happened, gunfights Billy never fought, escapes more impossible than the real ones. The actual Billy, a skinny kid with bad teeth who could be charming or vicious depending on his mood, disappeared beneath the myth. Some refused to believe Billy was dead. They claimed Garrett killed the wrong man, that Billy escaped and lived under a new name, that the body in Fort Sumner Cemetery was someone else. Over the decades, several old men came forward claiming to be Billy the Kid, saying they'd faked their death and lived quiet lives. None provided convincing evidence. Historians who examined the claims, the forensics, the witness testimonies, all reached the same conclusion. Billy the Kid died in Pete Maxwell's bedroom on July 14, 1881, shot through the heart by Pat Garrett, killed by a man who knew him well enough to recognize his voice in complete darkness. Fort Sumner still exists. You can visit Billy's grave in the old military cemetery, though the original wooden marker is gone, replaced by stone. The grave has been vandalized repeatedly, stolen twice, recovered, and caged in iron to prevent further theft. The Maxwell house where Billy died burned down years ago, but a museum marks the spot. You can stand where Pat Garrett stood when he fired, where Billy fell, where the most famous outlaw in the Old West asked his final question in Spanish and received a bullet as an answer. Pat Garrett lived another 27 years after killing Billy. He tried ranching, law enforcement, customs work. Nothing satisfied him. He wrote a book about hunting Billy, but it sold poorly because readers found it boring compared to the dime novels. Garrett grew bitter, drinking heavily, arguing with neighbors, making enemies. On February 29, 1908, someone shot him in the back of the head while he was urinating beside a road in New Mexico. The killer was never conclusively identified. Some said it was a dispute over grazing rights. Others whispered it was revenge for Billy, that one of the kid's friends had finally settled the score 27 years later. Garrett died face down in the dirt, murdered as casually as he'd lived after Fort Sumner. Historical records confirm the basic facts. Billy the Kid was born Henry McCarty, probably in 1859, making him 21 when he died. He killed his first man at around 18, not 12, as some legends claim. He participated in the Lincoln County War, a bloody conflict over commerce and politics that left dozens dead. He killed at least 8 men personally, possibly 4 more in group shootouts, not 21 as myth suggests. He escaped from jail twice. Pat Garrett tracked him for months, caught him once, watched him escape after killing 2 guards, then hunted him again until that night in Fort Sumner. The impossible part isn't any single gunfight or escape. The impossible part is how a skinny kid with no education, no family, and no money became the most famous outlaw in America by age 21. How he survived as long as he did against professional lawmen, hired killers, and military forces. How he inspired loyalty in friends and terror in enemies. How he could be charming and vicious, generous and lethal, beloved and hunted all at once. How his legend grew so large that people still argue about him 144 years after his death. Billy the Kid walked into Pete Maxwell's bedroom barefoot, unarmed, and hungry after a dance. He asked a simple question. ¿Quién es? Who is it? The answer was his best friend, sitting in darkness with a loaded pistol, having tracked him for 7 months across New Mexico territory. Billy never drew a gun because he wasn't wearing one. He died asking who someone was, never learning that the person who killed him was the friend he'd trusted most. That's the real tragedy of Billy the Kid. Not that he died young, but that he died betrayed, shot by someone who knew exactly whose voice he was aiming at in that dark room. Pat Garrett's hand shook for the rest of his life, not because he'd killed Billy the Kid, the outlaw, but because he'd killed Billy, his friend, a 21-year-old kid who'd made him laugh, who'd shared meals and secrets, and rode alongside him before money and law got between them. Garrett pulled that trigger in darkness, recognized the voice too late to stop, and spent 27 years trying to forget the sound Billy made when the bullet went through his heart. Some betrayals you can survive. This one killed them both, just at different speeds. The grave at Fort Sumner is real. The museum is real. The historical records, witness testimonies, and forensic evidence are real. Billy the Kid died July 14, 1881, shot through the heart by Pat Garrett in Pete Maxwell's bedroom at Fort Sumner, New Mexico territory. He was 21 years old. He asked, ¿Quién es?, and never got an answer he could understand. That's not legend. That's what actually happened. And Pat Garrett's hand never stopped shaking.